there is belief, and then there is skepticism. And between those two lies a vast territory of questions and the unknown. But what if reality is far more complex than we've been willing to perceive? And what if the stories that we dismiss as myth and legend hold the keys to understanding consciousness? From ghostly encounters to mysterious lights in the sky, humanity has always sensed there was something more out there. Some call it the paranormal, and others call it the divine. Some search the stars for answers, while others look within. They are all connected, threads in the grand tapestry of life. But we stand at a place where the fabric between realities is much thinner than you might think, because this is Crossroads of the Veil. Welcome back to Crossroads of the Veil. I'm your host, and tonight, we're opening the books that were sealed, the maps that were declared heresy, the blueprints that diagram the most dangerous and coveted prize in human history, the total transformation of the self. We all feel it, don't we? That persistent metaphor that echoes in our dreams, the journey to the summit of a sacred mountain. We feel we are in a shadowed valley, and we sense a luminous peak of transcendent awareness just beyond the clouds. Whether you call it Sinai, Olympus, or the allegorical mountain of the alchemists, the symbolism is the same. It's a place of revelation, a place where the finite human spirit comes into contact with the infinite. The air is thin, the path is treacherous, and to make the climb, you have to strip away everything you think you are. This is the journey, and for millennia, the cartographers of the soul, the mystics, the sages, the philosophers, have been drawing maps. Hermes Trismegistus, the Gnostic visionaries, the Christian desert fathers, the Kabbalists, the Sufi poets, the Buddhist arhats, and even the depth psychologists of our modern era. Each tradition offers its own chart, its own symbols, its own warnings of the crevasses and false peaks that await the unwary traveler. Tonight, we are laying all those maps on the table, side by side, and at the center of it all is one of the oldest, most detailed, and most mysterious maps ever created, the spiritual alchemy of Hermeticism. They called it the magnum opus, the great work. And as we're about to discover, this great work might just be the original blueprint, the master key, for every spiritual path on earth. But it's also a blueprint for a journey so dangerous, so fraught with peril, that it shatters the psyche as often as it enlightens it. This is our investigation. While the maps are many, the mountain is one. And we are going to trace the contours of this perennial path, this universal cartography of the soul's journey home. We begin not as believers, but as explorers, seeking to understand the timeless process of transformation that has called to the human spirit since the dawn of consciousness. It is a call to ascend, to leave the familiar lowlands, and venture into the rarefied air of the heights, where the ultimate revelation is not of a distant God, but of the divine mystery that resides at the very center of our own being. So lock your doors, settle in. We are about to map the infinite. Before we can compare the maps, we have to understand the master chart. We must go back to the source. Our journey begins in the sands of Greco-Roman Egypt, a crucible of colliding ideas, a mystical melting pot where the philosophies of Greece met the ancient magic of the pharaohs. From this crucible, a legendary figure emerges. He is not a historical man, but something more. A syncretic figure combining the Egyptian god of wisdom, Thoth, with the Greek messenger god Hermes. They called him Hermes Trismegistus, Hermes the thrice great. He was revered in antiquity as the source of a primordial wisdom, a first knowledge that was given to humanity at the dawn of time. And the texts attributed to him, the Corpus Hermeticum, the Asclepius, and the cryptic foundational emerald tablet are not just philosophy. They are an instruction manual. This is the magnum opus, the great work. Now, when you hear alchemy, you immediately think of medieval quacks in dusty labs trying to turn physical lead into physical gold. Forget all of it. That, the texts tell us, was a metaphor to hide the true work from the uninitiated, from the profane. The real laboratory was the alchemist's own soul. The real lead was the alchemist's own chaotic, unrefined self, what they called the prima materia, or the first matter. And the real gold, That was the lapis philosophorum, the philosopher's stone. But it wasn't a stone, it was a state of being. It was a symbol for perfected consciousness, spiritual immortality, and total union with the All. The great work is a psycho-spiritual process to transform you from a mortal, confused human into a perfected, immortal, and enlightened being. This is a breathtaking claim. It's a recipe for deification. And this Hermetic worldview is built on a few core principles that you must understand, or the rest of the maps make no sense. The most famous is from the Emerald Tablet, an axiom you've probably heard, but whose implications are terrifying. That which is above is from that which is below, and that which is below is from that which is above, working the miracles of one. As above, so below. This is the principle of correspondence. It posits a fundamental sympathy between all planes of existence. The macrocosm, the entire universe, the planets, the stars, and the microcosm, you, the human being, your soul, are reflections of each other. You are a universe in miniature. This means the alchemist in his lab, or his soul, isn't just manipulating his own mind. He is participating in the cosmic processes of creation. He is purifying that principle in his reality. This principle is what makes the magic possible. It's the engine of transformation. This engine is governed by other laws, articulated in the modern text, the Kabbalion, which claims to distill these ancient teachings. First, the principle of mentalism. The all is mind, the universe is mental. This is the master key. It means reality is a mental creation, a thought in the mind of God, or the divine mind. And because you are a reflection of that mind, as above, so below, your deepest consciousness, your nous, is consubstantial with it. Therefore, to change your reality, you must first transform your consciousness. Then there's the principle of polarity. Everything has two poles. Hot and cold are not two different things. They are two ends of the spectrum called temperature. Love and hate are two ends of the same spectrum. The alchemist learns to transmute one into the other, to climb the pole from hate to love, from fear to courage. Then there's the principle of rhythm. Everything flows, out and in. A pendulum swing is in everything. The alchemist learns to understand this rhythm, to not be a victim of life's ebbs and flows, but to use the swing, to find stability in the middle. So, the alchemist is not a priest, praying for a miracle. The alchemist is a scientist of these hidden laws, a spiritual engineer. The goal is gnosis. This is a Greek word. It doesn't mean belief, it doesn't mean faith. It means knowledge. Direct, experiential, transformative knowledge of the divine, the cosmos, and yourself. The poem Andres, the most famous of the Hermetic texts, says the greatest evil is agnosia, ignorance of God. Salvation is not achieved by piety, but by knowing. And what is the story of this path? The poem Andres text lays it out as a vision, a kind of cosmic thriller. Hermes sees a limitless, joyous light. This is poem Andres, the mind of all masterhood, God. This mind creates a second formative mind, the demiurge, who in turn creates the seven rulers, the governors of the planetary spheres, who enclose our cosmos and whose administration is called fate. Then the All-Father mind creates man, a being made in his own image, co-equal to himself. Possessing the creative impulse of his Father, this divine man desires to create as well. He descends from the highest spiritual plane, passing down through the seven planetary spheres. And as he passes through each sphere, he acquires their characteristics: the instability of the moon, the cunning of Mercury, the passion of Venus, the arrogance of the sun, the aggression of Mars, the greed of Jupiter, and the falsehood of Saturn. Upon reaching the lower material realm, man sees his own divine form reflected in nature, falls in love with it, and wills to dwell within it. Nature embraces him, and man becomes enmeshed in the material body. This is the central tragedy of the Hermetic myth. Man is now a dual being, mortal because of body, but because of the essential man immortal. A divine God, now a slave to fate, subject to the passions of the planets, trapped in an irrational sleep of material existence. The goal of the great work, therefore, is to reverse this fall, to awaken the essential man from this sleep and guide him on an ascent back up the celestial ladder, shedding the planetary vices at each sphere until he returns to his divine source. Now, let's put that map on the table and lay another, more familiar one next to it: the modern concept of spiritual awakening. What does that look like? It's a journey that seems to follow a universal archetypal pattern. It often begins with a trigger or call, a moment of crisis, a profound loss, a deep existential dread that shatters your conventional worldview. This is followed by a period of total disorientation and struggle, what is famously called the dark night of the soul. The old identity and belief structures dissolve, leading to fear, loneliness, and a sense of meaninglessness. This, the masters say, is a necessary purification. If navigated successfully, this crisis gives way to a path of intentional reconstruction. The individual adopts practices, meditation, self-inquiry, ethical living. This leads to a stage of illumination, of profound insights, intuitive clarity, and a growing sense of peace and connection. Finally, the journey culminates in a state of union or integration. The division between me and the world dissolves. The division between the human and the divine dissolves into a stable, non-dual awareness. Look at the two maps. The Hermetic map is a deliberate, willed descent into chaos to force a rebirth and an ascent. The spiritual awakening map is often an involuntary crisis that triggers a purification and leads to union. The language is different, but the process, the stages, are identical. Both describe a profound deconstruction followed by a sublime reconstitution. Both speak of a necessary descent into darkness before the ascent to light is possible. The Hermetic magnum opus seems to be the technical manual for the very same journey people are spontaneously finding themselves on today. It's a detailed, step-by-step guide to what we now call enlightenment. And like any good map of a treacherous continent, it contains warnings. It shows where the monsters are, because on this path, the greatest danger is not that you will fail, it's that you will succeed, and in succeeding, lose your mind or your soul. The path to the light, you see, begins in total darkness. Everyone wants the rubedo, the gold, the philosopher's stone, the unitive state of bliss. Everyone wants to talk about spiritual awakening as joy, peace, and connection, but they don't want to talk about the price of admission. They don't want to talk about the gate you must pass through to even begin the work. The alchemists had a name for it. It was the first, most critical, and most dangerous stage of the magnum opus. They called it the nigredo, the blackening. It represents dissolution, decomposition, putrefaction. It is, quite literally, the death of the old self. This is not a metaphor. The alchemist, in the laboratory of their soul, must confront their own darkness, their unacknowledged and repressed aspects, what we would later call in the shadow. This is a period of absolute chaos, despair, and intense psychological suffering. The matter in the alchemical vessel, your psyche, turns black, signifying that the old rigid structures of your ego have been broken down, dissolved, reduced back to the primordial, undifferentiated prima materia. It is a necessary death before any true rebirth can occur. The alchemist induces this state. They willingly step into the crucible. This is the stage that most often glamorized and most deeply misunderstood. In Christian mysticism, it was given its most famous name by the 16th century mystic St. John of the Cross, the dark night of the soul, and the most terrifying part. The dark night is not a psychological disorder. It is not clinical depression, though it shares its symptoms. Despair, anhedonia, the inability to feel pleasure, a profound sense of worthlessness and meaninglessness. The critical difference is that the dark night is a spiritual crisis, not a chemical one, and it typically occurs after the initial stages of awakening. It happens after you've already had the blissful experiences, after you've felt the connection, after you've seen the light. And then one day, the light is withdrawn. The connection goes dead. God, the universe, the source, whatever you called it, goes silent. Your spiritual practices feel empty. Your prayers bounce off the ceiling. You are left utterly and completely alone, in a void, abandoned. This is not a punishment. According to the mystics, it is the final deep purgation. Its purpose is to eradicate the soul's most subtle, most hidden attachment. Its attachment to spiritual experiences themselves. It's the universe's way of asking you, do you love me, or do you just love the feelings I give you? As St. John explained, the divine light of reality is so brilliant that it blinds the unpurified soul, causing it to experience this infusion of ultimate reality as darkness, pain, and emptiness. It is the unselfing that precedes the final unitive life. It is the functional core of the nigredo, the point of absolute despair that contains the seed of the most profound transformation. This is the great hidden danger of the path. The ego, the psychological structure that gives you a sense of a stable, separate identity, does not surrender willingly. It does not go quietly into that good night. Its dissolution has experienced a literal death, and it will fight for its survival with every weapon it has. This is the first peril, the psychological crisis. You are plunged into an uncertain territory without the familiar landmarks of your old personality. As the boundaries of your rational mind dissolve, you may experience non-ordinary states of consciousness, visions, the emergence of powerful, terrifying archetypal content from the deep unconscious. Without a guide, without a map, it is common to fear that you are losing your mind, that you are going insane. This is particularly acute when repressed trauma and powerful buried emotions surface to be purified. This is the calcination stage of the alchemical work, the process of heating a solid to a high temperature to burn off impurities, reducing it to a fine ash. This is the fire of suffering. It is the conscious act of dismantling the false, calcified personality to reveal the true essence beneath. If the calcination is the fire, the next operation is the flood, dissolution. The ashes from that fire are then dissolved in water. This represents the immersion of your conscious self into the vast dark ocean of the unconscious. It involves the release of repressed feelings, the breaking down of any rigid structures that even survived the fire. It is a total surrender, and in that surrender, many are lost. But the dangers are not just internal. The path brings profound social crises. As you awaken, your values fundamentally change. Your perception of reality alters. This inevitably creates a chasm between you and your previous social world. Friends, family, and partners may not understand the changes. They may see you as getting weird, or crazy, or depressed. This leads to judgment, rejection, and a profound, bone-deep loneliness. You lose interest in the conventional goals that society is built on. Career, status, material wealth. You become an alien in your own life, unable to relate, unable to connect. This alienation is a functional part of the Negredo. It is the separation stage, forcing you to find your center within rather than in the validation of others. And then, perhaps, come the most insidious dangers of all, the spiritual traps. These are the false peaks, the mirages in the desert. The first is ego inflation, or spiritual narcissism. This is a particularly nasty trap where the ego, in a brilliant act of self-preservation, co-opts the spiritual journey for its own aggrandizement. You have a profound insight, a powerful experience, and the ego immediately rushes in and says, "Wow, I am so enlightened, I am special, I am more evolved than others." The ego isn't destroyed, it just builds a new spiritual persona. It's a new, more subtle mask. The individual may start acting spiritual, seeking validation for their holiness. Judging others is less evolved. This is a dead end. It is the ultimate perversion of the work, halting all true progress. The second trap is spiritual bypassing. This is the tendency to use spiritual ideas and practices to avoid dealing with unresolved psychological wounds, painful emotions, and real-world responsibilities. You use the concept of oneness to deny personal responsibility. You adopt a stance of detached non-attachment to avoid the pain of a breakup or the grief of a loss. You use meditation to numb yourself, rather than to know yourself. This misuse of spirituality prevents genuine healing. It is not Negredo, it is anesthesia. It doesn't dissolve the ego, it just puts it to sleep. The third trap is the delusion of arrival. After a profound breakthrough, it is easy to believe you have reached the final goal. You're done. This contentment with a particular state or insight leads to complacency. As the Sufi masters warned, one of the greatest dangers is to become content with the vision of dreams instead of continuing the journey to their source. These perils, the dark night, the fear of insanity, the social alienation, the traps of ego inflation and spiritual bypassing, are not signs that the process has gone wrong. The source texts are clear. They are functional and integral parts of the transformation. They are the tests. They are the guardians at the gate. They are the dragons on the map, and they are there to ensure that only the worthy, only the purified, can make the ascent. The alchemists knew this. The Negredo wasn't a problem to be solved. It was the work to be done. It is the price of admission. In the shadowy, mystical world of Hellenistic Egypt, two maps for the soul's journey were being drawn simultaneously. They were sibling traditions, born from the same intellectual soup, speaking the same language. We've met Hermeticism. Now we must meet its darker, more radical twin, Gnosticism. On the surface, they look almost identical. Both are paths of gnosis, salvation through direct, revealed knowledge, not faith. Both depict the human soul as a divine spark, a fragment of God that has fallen from a higher spiritual realm. Both agree that this divine spark is now trapped in the material world, its ascent hindered by cosmic powers that rule the planets. Both therefore preach a path of awakening from the ignorant sleep of material existence, and prescribe a journey of ascent through the planetary spheres to return home. The Gnostic map, like the Hermetic, describes a celestial ladder, but on the Gnostic map, the rungs are guarded. They believed the cosmos was a vast, multi-layered prison, ruled by the archons, the rulers, a set of malevolent or at best, ignorant cosmic jailers. These archons, often identified with the 7 classical planets, bar the soul's ascent. The entire Gnostic path was about learning the secret knowledge, the passwords, the seals, that would allow the soul to bypass these terrible guardians after death and escape. The Hermetic map, as we saw in the poem Andres, also has a celestial ladder of 7 spheres, ruled by the 7 rulers. The Hermetic initiate must also ascend this ladder, and to do so, they must surrender the negative characteristic they acquired from that sphere on their way down. Let's look at that Hermetic ascent again, because it is an alchemical operation in itself. The soul, upon the dissolution of the physical body, or in spiritual practice, the ego, begins its upward journey. At the first zone, the moon, the soul gives up the energy of growth and waning, its emotional instability, its attachment to the cycles of physical life. At the second zone, Mercury, the soul sheds the device of evils, its cunning, its deceit, the machinations of the lower intellect. At the third zone, Venus, the soul abandons the guile of the desires, base lust, raw passion, attachment to sensual pleasure. At the fourth zone, the Sun, the soul relinquishes domineering arrogance, the core of the unrefined ego, pride, the will to power. At the fifth zone, Mars, the soul casts off unholy daring, anger, aggression, reckless impulse. At the sixth zone, Jupiter, the soul surrenders, striving for wealth by evil means, greed, avarice, attachment to status. And at the seventh zone, Saturn, the soul leaves behind ensnaring falsehood, the fundamental ignorance that binds the soul to the material world in the first place. Having stripped itself of these 7 irrational garments of the lower psyche, the soul arrives at the 8th sphere, the Ogdoad, which lies beyond the realm of fate. Here, clothed in his proper power, the soul joins the celestial beings. It hears the hymns of the powers even higher, and finally, in a great procession, the souls ascend to the Father, surrender themselves to the powers, and becoming powers themselves, are fully absorbed into God. The goal is explicit. This the good end for those who have gained gnosis to be made one with God. It sounds identical to the Gnostic path, an ascent, 7 spheres, 7 rulers, and final liberation. So, where is the divergence? It is the most fundamental, most profound divergence imaginable. It's not about the path, it's about the nature of reality itself. It's the difference between a prison and a laboratory. For the Gnostics, the material world, the entire physical cosmos, is intrinsically evil. It is a mistake. It is an abortion. They believed it was created not by the true transcendent God, but by a lesser, flawed, ignorant, or outright malevolent creator God. They called him the Demiurge. This Demiurge, this public craftsman, created the material world and the archons as a prison to trap the divine sparks of light that had fallen from the true God's realm, the pleroma, the fullness. Your body is not a temple, it is a cage. Nature is not a divine reflection, it is a corrupt simulation. Therefore, the Gnostic goal is one thing and one thing only: escape. Salvation is fleeing the world, abandoning the body, rejecting creation itself, and returning to the transcendent light, never to look back. Hermeticism, by contrast, is a world-affirming philosophy. It holds a positive, or at least neutral, view of creation. The cosmos, as described in the poem Andres, is a divine and beautiful creation of the good God, the divine mind. The material world is not a prison to be fled, but a lower reflection of the divine that is to be understood, mastered, and perfected. This is the entire point of as above, so below. You are meant to make the below a perfected mirror of the above. The body is not a cage, it is the alchemical vessel, the Athenor where the great work is performed. This is the chasm that separates them. The Gnostic seeks to abandon the world. The Hermeticist seeks to redeem it. The Gnostic rejects matter. The alchemist works with matter, both physical and spiritual, to elevate it, to transmute it, to bring it to its perfected golden state. The Gnostic sees a jailer. The Hermeticist sees a reflection. This split, right at the dawn of these ideas, echoes down through the centuries. It is the fundamental choice every seeker must make. Is this world a trap to be escaped? Or is it a divine work of art that we are here to help complete? The Gnostic says, "This is not my home." The alchemist says, "I will make this my home, and I will make it as perfect as heaven." Two maps, one goal, gnosis, but one leads to escape, the other to transmutation. From the philosophical hothouse of Egypt, our maps now move into the cloisters and cells of medieval Europe. And here we find a shocking parallel. It seems the Christian mystics, the monks and nuns, who dedicated their lives to a direct experiential knowledge of God, were following the Hermetic map, perhaps without even knowing it. The structural parallels between the Hermetic magnum opus and the classic threefold way of Christian mysticism are not just close, they are staggering. They are a one-to-one match. Let's lay the maps side by side. The Christian mystical path is described as 3 stages. First, the purgative way, or catharsis. This is the initial stage of purification. It's the turning away from sin, the detachment from worldly desires. It is a phase of intense struggle, repentance, and the beginning of the battle with one's own darkness. Second, the illuminative way, or theoria. Following the purification, the soul begins to be illuminated by divine light. This is a stage of deep prayer and contemplation. The mystic receives profound insights into divine truths and experiences, spiritual consolations, feelings of joy, peace, and the overwhelming presence of God. Third, the unitive way, or theosis. This is the final stage, the goal of the entire journey. It is a stable, permanent mystical union with God, often described as a spiritual marriage between the soul and the divine. The soul does not lose its identity, but it is so perfectly united with God in love that it becomes a participant in the divine nature itself. Now let's look at the alchemical map again. The magnum opus is charted through a sequence of colors. First, the negredo, the blackening, the decomposition of the old self, the confrontation with the shadow, a period of chaos, despair, and purification. Second, the albedo, the whitening. Following the darkness, this stage signifies the purification of the soul. The matter is washed clean. It is a stage of illumination and dawning hope, where the first light of new consciousness appears. This is often followed by the citrinitas, the yellowing, which represents the dawning of the solar light of true wisdom. Third, the rubedo, the reddening, the final and culminating stage. It signifies the complete unification of opposites, spirit and matter, conscious and unconscious, masculine and feminine, heaven and earth. It is the creation of the philosopher's stone, often symbolized as the hieros gamos, the sacred marriage. The conclusion is inescapable. The purgative way is the negredo. The illuminative way is the albedo and citrinitas. The unitive way is the rubedo. The alchemist in his hidden laboratory and the monk in his lonely cell were on the exact same journey. The alchemist called the crisis putrefaction. The mystic called it the dark night of the soul. Both knew it was the necessary crucible. The alchemist called the goal the sacred marriage. The mystic called it the spiritual marriage. Both understood it as the union of the prepared soul with the ultimate divine. So, are they the same? Is there any difference at all? Yes. And just like with Gnosticism, the difference is not in the process. The difference is in the agent. It's the how. It is the core question of will versus grace. The Hermetic path, the alchemical magnum opus, is a path of active, self-directed work. Alchemist is a master artisan, a scientist of the spirit. Through gnosis, knowledge of the universal laws like as above, so below, and the principle of polarity, and through diligent effort, the alchemist achieves their own transformation. They are a co-creator with God, using the will to master the self and the cosmos. The alchemist actively builds the philosopher's stone. It is a triumph of will and knowledge. Christian mysticism, in complete contrast, is fundamentally a path of surrender and grace. While the mystic must engage in the work, they must pray, they must purify, they must be vigilant. The transformation itself is seen as a gift. It is not achieved by human will. It is granted by a personal, loving, and transcendent God. The goal of the Christian mystic is not to master the self, but to die to the self. It is a path of love and humility, of making oneself an empty vessel, so that the divine, Christ, may live within them. This is the critical divergence. The Hermeticist seeks to become God through knowledge and mastery. The Christian mystic seeks to unite with God through love and humility. The Hermeticist says, I will know, and by knowing, I will act, and I will become. The Christian mystic says, I will love, and by loving, I will surrender, and I will be made new. Let's look at that final stage again, the rubedo. This is the reddening, the culmination. It is the integration of life force with perfected consciousness. The symbols for it are the phoenix rising from the ashes, the pelican feeding its young with its own blood, and the red king uniting with the white queen. In the 7-stage operational model, this is the final operation, coagulation. After all the burning, dissolving, separating, joining, and distilling, the raising of consciousness to its highest point and reintegrating it, the purified spirit is made fixed and solid. The transformation is now permanent. The adept no longer has moments of higher consciousness. They are that consciousness, fully embodied. The Christian unitive way is the same. It is not a temporary high. It is a stable, permanent state of being, a life lived in total union with the divine. The process is identical, a fiery purification, an illumination, and a final permanent unification. But the operating system is completely different. This leaves us with a profound mystery. Does the universe respond to an act of supreme will or to an act of supreme surrender? The maps are the same, but the language they are written in, the force that animates them, could not be more different. We've seen the map as a journey, a 3-stage process of transformation, but now we encounter a map that is infinitely more complex. It's not just a path from A to B, it is a blueprint, a circuit diagram of the divine, a schematic for the cosmos, and a wiring diagram for your own soul all at once. We are talking, of course, about Jewish mysticism, the Kabbalah. Like Hermeticism, Kabbalah is an emanative system. This is a key concept. It means that reality emanates or pours forth from a single, ultimate, and unknowable divine source. In Kabbalah, this source is called the Ein Sof, the infinite, without end. It is a pure, undifferentiated, absolute nothing everything. To create the universe, this infinite source had to contract, a process called Tzimtzum, to make a space for creation. And into that space it emanated its own attributes, one by one, in a descending chain of creation. This diagram, this blueprint of divine emanation, is the central glyph of Kabbalah, the tree of life. It's not a physical tree, but a map of 10 divine spheres or nodes, which are called the Sephirot. These 10 Sephirot are the archetypal attributes of God, and the structural blueprint for all of creation, from the highest angelic realms all the way down to the physical world, and all the way down to the structure of your psyche. The spiritual path in Kabbalah, therefore, can be understood as an ascent back up the tree. The adept, the mystic, begins at the very bottom, in the 10th Sephirah called Malkut, the kingdom, which represents our physical, material world. Their goal is to climb back up the 22 paths connecting the Sephirot, sphere by sphere, integrating the lessons and energies of each one, until they reach the very top, the first Sephirah called Keter, the crown, which represents pure, undifferentiated unity with the Godhead, the Ein Sof. Does an ascent up a ladder of divine spheres sound familiar? It should. This path working up the tree of life is a direct structural parallel to the Hermetic ascent, back up the 7 planetary spheres, to escape fate and reach the Ogdode. The Hermeticists had 7 spheres, the Kabbalists had 10. The Hermeticists were reversing their fall in love with nature. The Kabbalists were reversing the fall of creation itself. The connection is so profound that it didn't stay parallel for long. In the Renaissance, a new syncretic system was born, Hermetic Kabbalah. This system, which became the foundation for virtually all of Western magic and esotericism, explicitly merged the 2 maps. Its practitioners overlaid the 7 classical planets of Hermeticism onto 7 of the 10 Sephirot. For example, the Sephirah of Chesed, mercy, was mapped to Jupiter, greed, but also expansion and authority. The Sephirah of Gevurah, severity, was mapped to Mars. aggression, but also strength and judgment. The Sephirah of Tifereth, beauty, the very heart of the tree, was mapped to the sun. Arrogance, but also the enlightened self. They knew it was the same map. They were fitting the two pieces together to create a more complete, unified system. So, what is the difference between the original Jewish Kabbalah and philosophical Hermeticism? The context. This is a massive divergence. Jewish Kabbalah is not, and has never been, a standalone philosophical system like Hermeticism. It is inextricably tied to the Hebrew Bible, the Torah, and to Jewish law, the Halakha. The Sephirot are understood through the lens of Torah interpretation. The paths on the tree are mapped to the letters of the Hebrew alphabet. The ascent, the path of tikkun or restoration, is achieved in large part through the meticulous fulfillment of the mitzvot, the divine commandments. It is a path of mystical religion. Hermeticism, by contrast, is a philosophical and magical system. It is, at its root, a form of pagan gnosis, born from Greco-Egyptian sources. It stands on its own, independent of any specific scriptural tradition. Its commandments are the universal laws of the cosmos. Its scriptures are the corpus hermeticum, which are philosophical dialogues with the divine mind, not a book of religious law. The Kabbalist and the Hermeticist are both looking at the same blueprint, but the Kabbalist sees it as a map of his covenant with God, a path walked through prayer and adherence to the law. The Hermeticist sees it as a map of gnosis, a path walked through knowledge, will, and theurgical operation. Let's just glance at this incredible map, the 10 Sephirot, to understand the journey. You start at 10, Malkuth, the kingdom, the physical world. You ascend to 9, Yesod, the foundation, the astral plane, the unconscious, the realm of dreams and illusion. From there, you ascend to 8, Hod, splendor, the sphere of intellect, logic, and communication, Mercury. You balance this with 7, Netzach, victory, the sphere of emotion, endurance, and passion, Venus. These two pour into 6, Tifereth, beauty, the heart of the tree, the center of balance. This is the Christ center, the sphere of the enlightened self, the true sun. Above this is a mini dark night, an abyss of knowledge. If you cross it, you reach 5, Gevura, severity, the sphere of judgment, strength, and contraction, Mars. You balance this with 4, Chesed, mercy, the sphere of love, expansion, and authority, Jupiter. These pour into 3, Bina, understanding, the great feminine structuring principle, the womb of creation, Saturn. This is balanced by 2, Chokmah, wisdom, the pure, undifferentiated flash of divine inspiration, the father principle. And finally, you return to 1, Keter, the crown, pure unity, the source, the point from which all else emerged. This is the map, a 10-stage magnum opus. The alchemist was working with 4 colors and 7 operations. The Kabbalist was working with 10 spheres and 22 paths. The map just got exponentially more complex. But the journey, an ascent through the structures of reality to return to the divine source, remains unchanged. We have seen the map as a path of knowledge, of will, of scripture. Now we encounter a map that is drawn not in ink but in fire. It is a path fueled not by the mind, but by the heart. An all-consuming, ecstatic, desperate love for the divine. We have arrived at the door of the Sufis, the mystical heart of Islam. The Sufi path, the tariqah, is like all the others, a journey of stages. The seeker, the salik, moves through what are called maqamat, or stations. And this is a critical distinction. These are not awal, or fleeting states of bliss. These are stable stages of spiritual development, permanent achievements that are earned through disciplined effort, through practices of repentance, renunciation, patience, and trust. This concept of stable, earned stations strongly parallels the alchemical operations. You don't just feel the albedo, you achieve the albedo. You earn it through the work of the Negredo. The Sufi path is often described as a journey through 7 valleys, as famously articulated by the poet Attar in his masterpiece Conference of the Birds. The birds of the world, a metaphor for human souls, embark on a perilous quest to find their true king, the Simurgh. To reach him, they must cross 7 valleys. The valley of the quest, the valley of love, the valley of understanding, the valley of detachment, the valley of unity, the valley of astonishment, and finally the valley of poverty and annihilation. This 7-stage map is yet another powerful parallel to the 7-stage alchemical operations and the 7-sphere hermetic ascent. But the most profound, most shocking parallel is found at the very end of the Sufi path. It is found in their description of the goal, and it mirrors the core engine of alchemy so perfectly it will take your breath away. The fundamental maxim of the entire alchemical process, the rhythm that drives the great work, is solve et coagula, dissolve and coagulate. First, you must dissolve. You must break down, deconstruct, and liquidate the false, rigid, leaden ego. This is the nigredo. Then, from that purified essence, you must coagulate. You must bind, reform, and reconstitute a new, higher, golden order. This is the rubedo. Solve et coagula, dissolve and coagulate. The Sufis have 2 words for the pinnacle of the mystical journey. The first is fana. Fana means annihilation. It is the total annihilation of the individual self, the nafs or ego, in the overwhelming, all-consuming presence of God. The mystic dies before they die. They lose all sense of a separate identity. The drop of water dissolves into the infinite ocean. This is solve. It is the most perfect, most poetic, most terrifying description of the nigredo and the dissolution stages ever written. It is the absolute deconstruction of the self. But it does not end there. If it ended in fana, it would just be oblivion. It would be a void. There is a second stage. It is called baka. Baka means subsistence, or abiding. The individual consciousness returns. The drop reforms, but it is no longer just a drop of water. It is a drop that knows it is the ocean. The individual self, now completely purified and annihilated of all its egoic dross, subsists or abides in God. It is no longer the limited ego. It is a perfected mirror for the divine attributes, a conscious instrument for the divine will, returned to the world but no longer of the world. This is coagula. This is the philosopher's stone. It is the alchemical principle of reconstitution into a new, perfected, and stable form. The nigredo is fana. The rubedo is baka. The alchemist and the Sufi, the sage and the poet, were undertaking the exact same process. So where is the difference? The divergence is not the what or the how, but the why. It is the motivation, the emotional tone of the path. Hermeticism, as we've seen, is a path of knowledge and will. It is philosophical, theurgical, and while reverent, it is not ecstatic. The alchemist is a sage, a magus who seeks to understand and master the laws of the cosmos to achieve self-perfection. Sufism is overwhelmingly, unapologetically, a path of love. The driving force is not a desire for knowledge, but an ecstatic, all-consuming, fiery love for God as the divine beloved. The Sufi is a lover who is lost in the beloved. The goal is not self-perfection in the hermetic sense, but to become a perfect lover, so annihilated in the object of their love that only the beloved remains. The poems of Rumi are not philosophical treatises. They are the cries of a heart on fire, a heart that has been shattered by this divine love. The Hermeticist, through Gnosis, achieves the stone. The Sufi, through ISHQ, surrenders to Fana and is granted Baka. One is an act of supreme will. The other is an act of supreme passion. One is the path of the sage. The other is the path of the ecstatic poet. And yet, both lead to the same place. Both involve a 7-stage journey. Both are animated by the same rhythm of solve et coagula. It seems the universe has 2 doors to the same room. You can pick the lock with knowledge, or you can be so consumed by love that the door simply dissolves before you. We have laid the maps on the table, the Hermetic map of Gnosis, the Gnostic map of escape, the Christian map of grace, the Kabbalistic map of the tree, the Sufi map of love, and while their languages, their motivations, and their contexts are different, they all share a fundamental premise, that there is a you, a soul, a divine spark, an essential man, and the goal is to purify and perfect this you and unite it with the divine. All the maps lead to the top of the same mountain, to the perfection of the self. And now we come to a map that charts the exact same territory, demands the exact same work, but insists that the goal is to realize that the mountain does not exist, and that the climber was never real. We have arrived at the most profound, the most fundamental, the great metaphysical divergence in all of human mysticism. We have arrived at the crossroads of Hermeticism and Buddhist mysticism. At first glance, the paths seem to run parallel. Buddhist mysticism, at its core, is a path of profound mental cultivation. It involves rigorous meditation, strict ethical discipline, and the pursuit of wisdom. The Buddhist practitioner works to purify the mind from the kleshas, or defilements, the three poisons of greed, hatred, and ignorance. This sounds exactly like the alchemist working to purify the prima materia of its dross. The Hermetic emphasis on transcending the illusions of the senses and the passions of the lower self, which are borrowed from the planets, resonates perfectly with the Buddhist goal of overcoming tanha, craving, or attachment, which is the root of all suffering. The Buddhist map is the Four Noble Truths. Life is dukkha, suffering, unsatisfactoriness. This is the nigredo state, the recognition that ordinary unawakened life is chaos and pain. The cause of dukkha is tanha, craving, attachment. This is the passions of the planets. The cessation of dukkha is possible. The goal exists. The path to the cessation of dukkha is the Noble Eightfold Path: right view, right intention, right speech, right actions, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, right concentration. This Eightfold Path is the magnum opus. It is the work. It is the alchemical operations of purification. Both paths lead to a state of liberation from the ordinary human condition. The alchemical stages of nigredo, albedo, and rubedo can be seen as a Western parallel to the Buddhist path of purification, the meditative stages, jhanas, and the final attainment of nirvana. But it is here at the summit that the two paths diverge so completely it shatters the entire framework. It is a diametrical opposition on the most fundamental question of reality. Let's be crystal clear. Hermeticism is a path of self-perfection. Its entire goal is to take the essential man, the immortal soul, the divine spark, and purify it, integrate it, and deify it. The magnum opus culminates in the creation of a perfected, eternal self, the philosopher's stone. The self is real, the self is immortal, and the self is the ultimate object of the work. Buddhism is a path of no self. Its core, non-negotiable insight is the doctrine of anatta. This doctrine states that there is no permanent, unchanging, independent self or soul to be found in any part of human experience. The self, the ego, the I that you think you are, is not a thing. It is a process. It's a temporary bundle of physical and mental aggregates. The idea of a separate, permanent self is in fact the fundamental illusion that gives rise to all suffering, because this self is always trying to protect itself, aggrandize itself, and prevent itself from changing, which is impossible. The ultimate goal of Buddhism, nirvana, literally means to extinguish. It is the extinguishing of the fires of greed, hatred, and delusion, fires that are all fueled by the illusion of a separate self. Enlightenment in Buddhism is not the perfection of your eternal soul. It is the direct, liberating, and permanent insight that no such soul ever existed. This is the great paradox. How can this be? How can two paths that are procedurally so similar, purification, meditation, ethics, transcending the passions, have diametrically opposed metaphysical goals? The alchemist seeks to create an eternal golden self. The Buddhist seeks to realize there was never any self to begin with. This isn't a semantic difference. This is a schism at the very root of reality. One path sees the individual as a flawed but redeemable microcosm of the divine destined for glorification. The other sees the individual as a temporary conditioned construct whose dissolution is the key to liberation. And yet, the mystery remains. Perhaps the experience is the same. Perhaps the perfected divine self of the Hermeticist and the liberation into the void of no self of the Buddhist are just two different metaphors, two different interpretations for the same ineffable transcendent state, a state where the limited personal I simply ends. This is the crossroads. Is the goal to become a god, or to realize you are never even a you? The maps for the first time are pointing in two opposite directions. For centuries, the cryptic texts of the alchemists were gathering dust. They were dismissed by the post-Enlightenment world as the ramblings of primitive minds, a failed attempt at chemistry, a bizarre footnote of superstition. The magnum opus was a joke, the philosopher's stone, a fantasy. And then, in the 20th century, a Swiss psychiatrist, a man who had broken with his mentor Sigmund Freud, began a terrifying journey into his own unconscious. He called it his confrontation with the unconscious. His name was Carl Gustav Jung. Jung, in his search for a historical precedent for the transformative processes he was witnessing in his patients, and in himself, stumbled upon these old, forgotten alchemical texts. and he had a eureka moment that would change psychology forever. He realized the alchemists were not writing about chemistry. They were not writing about turning literal lead into literal gold. They were psychologists. Jung proposed a revolutionary and deeply disturbing thesis. The alchemist, without knowing it, had projected their own inner, unconscious process of psychological transformation onto the matter in their flasks. The magnum opus was not a recipe for metal. It was a coded map of the human psyche. It was a blueprint for the very same journey he was trying to guide his patients through. The journey to psychological wholeness, a process he termed individuation. And when he laid the alchemical map next to his own psychological map, the parallels were not just similar, they were exact. The alchemist, it seemed, had drawn a perfect diagram of the modern path to healing. Let's look at the evidence. Jung mapped the alchemical stages directly onto his model of psychological development. First, the nigredo, the blackening, the putrefaction, the death of the old self. Jung said this is a perfect description of the confrontation with the shadow. The shadow is Jung's term for the unconscious part of your personality. Everything you have repressed, denied, and disowned about yourself. It is your dark side. It's your greed, your anger, your fear, your insecurities. Jung insisted that the first step toward psychological wholeness is not to destroy the shadow, but to confront it, to make it conscious, to own it. This is an often painful, depressing, and chaotic process. It is a dark night of the soul. It is the nigredo. Second, the albedo, the whitening, the purification, the dawning light. Jung mapped this to the integration of the anima or animus. After confronting your personal dark side, the shadow, you must then engage with the collective unconscious, and the first archetype you meet is your soul image, the anima, the inner feminine in a man, or the animus, the inner masculine in a woman. This is the white queen or white swan of the alchemical texts. This process involves moving beyond projecting your inner other onto partners in the real world and integrating that contrasexual energy within yourself. This is the conjunction, the sacred marriage of the alchemical king and queen, but happening inside your own mind. Third, the rubedo, the reddening, the final unification, the creation of the philosopher's stone. Jung said this is a perfect symbol for the realization of the self. For Jung, the self is not the ego. The self is the archetype of wholeness, the entire integrated personality, the ordering principle of the entire psyche. In the individuated person, the ego is no longer the king of the personality. The ego serves this new, larger, integrated center. The ego orbits the self, like a planet orbits the sun. This is the culmination of the individuation process. It results in a personality that is whole, authentic, and connected to the transpersonal depths of the collective unconscious. The philosopher's stone, the lapis, which alchemists said could heal all imperfect metals and bring them to gold, is a direct symbol of the realized self, a psyche that is so whole it has a healing golden effect on the world around it. Suddenly, the entire alchemical map made sense in a modern context. Calcination, that's the fiery process of burning away your false persona, the mask you wear for society. Dissolution, that's the immersion of your conscious ego into the waters of the unconscious, your dreams, your feelings, your active imagination, as Jung called it. Separation, that's the analytical process of discerning your true, authentic self from the dross of your conditioned responses, your parental and societal programming. Conjunction, the sacred marriage of your inner opposites, logic and intuition, mind and body, masculine and feminine. Distillation, the raising of this new consciousness, testing it, refining it. Coagulation, the final stabilization of this new individuated self. It's not a temporary high, it's who you are now. Jung had found the key. He had unlocked the cipher, but in doing so, he created the final and perhaps most challenging divergence, the difference in framework. Hermeticism, as we've seen, is metaphysical and spiritual. Its goal is the soul's liberation from mortal existence and its ultimate union with the divine mind. It is ontological. It's about the very nature of being. Jung's model is explicitly psychological and mostly secular. His goal was the health and wholeness of the psyche within the context of a finite human life. He interpreted the alchemical symbols as representations of intrapsychic processes. He was a doctor of the mind, not a priest of the soul. This leaves us with a truly chilling question. a question that sits at the very crossroads of the ancient and modern worlds. Did Carl Jung, with his brilliant rational mind, reduce a real divine, magical, and metaphysical system to just psychology? Or did the ancient alchemists, in their mystical fervor, discover the deep archetypal blueprint of the human psyche and mistake it for God? Is the magnum opus a path to uniting with the divine mind, or is it a path to uniting with your own unconscious? Or is it possible that those two things are exactly the same? We have reached the end of our investigation. We have laid the maps on the table side by side, and the discovery is staggering, undeniable. The magnum opus of Hermeticism, the great work, is not an obscure historical artifact, not an isolated esoteric curiosity. It is a universal cartography of the soul. It is a master blueprint for the perennial human journey of transformation. We have seen its structure echo like a profound subterranean truth through every tradition we've examined. The core thesis is affirmed. The various paths to enlightenment, despite their diverse languages, symbols, and theologies, are all charting the same fundamental territory. They are all descriptions of a single archetypal process of consciousness evolution. And what is that process? It is the eternal alchemical rhythm. Solva et coagula, dissolve and coagulate. First a deconstruction, a breaking down, a dissolution, a solve. This is the Negredo of the alchemist, the purgative way, and the dark night of the soul of the Christian mystic. This is the Gnostic's horrifying realization that the world is a prison. This is the Kabbalist's recognition of the soul's exile in the material world. This is the Sufi's ecstatic annihilation, the fana, the death before death. This is the Buddhist's core insight into dukkha, the all-pervasive suffering of conditioned existence. And it is the modern confrontation with the shadow in Jungian psychology. It is the first step, and it is always a death. The old false limited ego self must be systematically dismantled and dissolved into its chaotic, primordial first matter. It is a terrifying, painful, and chaotic experience, and it is, in every tradition, the one non-negotiable prerequisite. Second, a reconstitution, a binding together, a reformation, a coagula. Following the dissolution, the essential elements of the self are purified, illuminated, and reintegrated in a new, higher, and more stable order. This is the albedo and the rubedo of the alchemist, the illuminative and unitive ways of the mystic. This is the Kabbalist's step-by-step ascent of the tree of life. This is the Sufi's return to the world in Baka subsistence, a perfected mirror of the divine. This is the Buddhist's walk on the Noble Eightfold Path, and it is the Jungian integration of the archetypes and the final realization of the whole individuated self. It is the birth of a new, more authentic, and more expansive state of being. The perils of this path, the Negredo, the dark night, the spiritual traps, they are not accidents. They are the functional tests of the crucible, the fire that burns away the dross. The maps are all the same, but we are left with the great unanswered questions, the profound divergences that lie not in the path but in the destination and the motive. The first mystery, gnosis versus grace. Is transformation an act of will or an act of surrender? Do you, like the Hermetic alchemist, achieve your own perfection through knowledge and mastery? Or do you, like the Christian mystic or the Sufi lover, receive it as a gift through an act of total loving surrender? Is the engine of this journey the will, or is it the heart? The second and greater mystery, self versus no self. This is the ultimate schism. What is the final destination? Is it the perfection and deification of an eternal divine self, as the Hermeticists, Kabbalists, and Jungians propose? Is the goal to build the philosopher's stone, the perfect, immortal soul? Or is the entire concept of a self the fundamental illusion? Is the goal, as the Buddhists insist, the annihilation of this illusion, the nirvana, the extinguishing of the self to realize a state of anatta or no self? How can both be true? How can the summit of the mountain be both the ultimate self and the ultimate nothingness? Is it possible that self and no self are just two different fingers pointing at the same moon? These are not the only maps. We haven't even unrolled the charts of the Hindu yogas. Karma Yoga, the path of selfless action. Bhakti Yoga, the path of devotion. Another map of love like Sufism. Jnana Yoga, the path of knowledge. Another map of gnosis like Hermeticism. And Raja Yoga, the path of meditation. The maps are everywhere. The maps are on the table, the Hermetic path of will. the Christian path of surrender, the Buddhist path of annihilation, the Jungian path of wholeness, and the shadow path of power. They all claim to transform consciousness. They all start with the same blueprint of the human mind. The only question left is the one that every alchemist, every mystic, and every seeker must finally ask themselves alone, in the dark. Which map will you follow? And what or who will you become when you reach the end? As we step back from the crossroads, remember the story doesn't end here, because this is just the beginning, searching for the knowledge and wisdom to unravel the mysteries of our universe. Unexplained sightings, spirits, and science. They are all connected in the grand tapestry of life. So remember, keep pulling at the threads, because this has been Crossroads of the Veil.